Okay, how you doing, people? 9 o'clock, an hour later than normal. But here we are, Sports Therapy Association podcast. How you doing? It is 9 o'clock tonight because our guest is joining us from Melbourne. Melbourne, what's Melbourne? Melbourne, who basically just getting up for a Wednesday morning. It's about 10 hours ahead there. So that's why we're an hour later. Just making himself a cup of coffee there. I can see him settling into the morning. So there we go. Looking very much forward to that. My name is Matt Phillips, creator of Run Chat Live, and yes, you're listening to the Sports Therapy Association podcast. And we're very excited shortly to be bringing you Raphael Bender, all the way from Melbourne, who's going to be talking about evidence-based Pilates, a little chat through the era of Pilates. It's going to be a really, really useful episode. If you are joining us live, then feel free to ask questions. You can do that by just hitting that comment button. You can do that whether you are in the Sports Therapy Association Facebook page, or if you are joining us via the YouTube stream as well, you can do that. If you are listening to the podcast, then thank you very much. Appreciate it. If you could leave a little rating, that would be even nicer, and a review, because it really helps us just appear higher up in the Google search and things. That'd be really nice. If you're on an iPhone, it should take you about 20 seconds. You've got no excuses. If you're on Android, it's going to take you about a minute, and I think you have to go to iTunes. So I understand if you can't do that. I never do. So there you go. But yeah, appreciate it, all you iPhone users. That'd be great. Okay, before we actually do start this evening's show, we're just going to spend a few moments here just in respect and support for the family and friends of the amazing Paula Clayton, who tragically passed away a couple of days ago following a battle with thyroid cancer. I know a lot of the Sports Therapy Association members have probably met Paula, or at least listened to her. A fantastic, inspirational member of our industry who's done so much and helped so many people. Touched the hearts of everyone. I had the good fortune of meeting her, and yeah, Paula, you're always in our hearts and minds. It's really sad. I'm feeling it now. But yeah, so just a few moments silence, and for those of you who listen to the podcast, we will be back after 20 seconds or so. The wonderful Paula Clayton. Anyway, so right, continuing with tonight's show then. Before I do, a massive thanks to last week's guest, Pura Singh. Those of you who haven't listened to that yet or seen it, it's on YouTube. And also, obviously, it's available on all podcast apps. It's such a great hour. I know I say that for every guest, and I'll be saying it for tonight's guest, and I'll say it for the next 73 guests as well. But it was such a great hour, such a great educator, such a great human being. Hugely experienced therapist, osteopath, who's worked across so many different sports, through golf, member of, he was the head osteopath for team athletics, GB, so experience of working in Tokyo and also in Rio. Also consultant osteopath to Birmingham City Football for the last 11 years, and more football teams who I can't remember because, as you know, I know nothing about football. But on top of all that, a wonderful human being, and he dropped some huge common sense bombs, but just framed in a way which meant so much to therapists. And I appreciate all the feedback that you've given to me and emailed through. And basically showing how by working with the elites, there's a massive take-home messages of how we can best serve our recreational athletes as well. So like I say, if you didn't see it with our guest Pura Singh, then check it out on YouTube if you like the video, if you want to see our pretty faces. A great beard he's got. I mean, yeah, he's a Sikh, so obviously it's there for a reason, but a fantastic beard. We did talk about that off air. Yeah, it's available there on podcast apps as well. So thank you very much. Right then, I've left him down for long enough in the dark, shadowy, tomb-like infrastructure that is our beloved lobby. So I'm very excited tonight. All about Pilates, people. Anybody who's been around as long as me probably saw the storm that Pilates was part of in the kind of early 2000s. And does it change since then? Has it changed since then? Can we still use it? Is it a dirty word? Can you say core stability now without having people jumping on their soapboxes and throwing things from their Twitter pedestals and things? I don't think you can. Maybe you should be able to. So that's something we're going to be talking about. And to do it, I've got one of the most respected and evidence-based Pilates trainers I can think of, and the pleasure of bringing up, who is Raphael, or Raf as he's affectionately known, Bender, all the way from Melbourne. So without further ado, I shall bring Raf up and we'll say hi. Hey Raf, how you doing?
Hey Matt, I'm awesome. How are you?
I'm awesome. Yeah, great to meet you, mate. Great to speak to you. I'm only laughing because anybody who's listened to the podcast, which I totally recommend, Pilates Elephants, then yeah, it's always, how are you, Raf? I'm awesome. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'm awesome. So good to meet you, mate. Thanks very much for coming along. As always, people, I mean, I know a lot of you are aware of Raf. If you've got any questions directly, then just fill it out. And that goes if you're on YouTube or in the Facebook group. Just write it in the comments and we can bring it up. For example, already the room is full of people. Some people like this later time. Alistair Cunningham has joined us. Hey, Alistair, how you doing? Sarah Jones is here. Catherine Rhyme has said, hi, everyone. I've had a little nap. Thanks for sharing, Catherine. So I'll stay awake a little longer. People have made adjustments to their circadian rhythms to actually be here tonight. Thank you, Catherine. That's much appreciated. Brian's in the house as usual. How you doing, Brian? Thanks for joining us. Alex, no, Atlas Sports Massage. Who is it? It's got Atlas Sports Massage. Can't remember the name of the person now. Anyway, they say, hi all. The late start has worked out well today. Great. And Becky as well. And Gary, founder of the STA, is in here as well. So there you go. Thanks for joining us, people. I appreciate it. An hour later, knocking your normal schedules out of the way. Let's get rid of that for now. So, Raf, what time is it in Melbourne? Did I get it right? Is it like 7
yeah, just gone 7 a.m. Yeah,
exactly. I extra appreciate you turning up because your partner in crime, Cloe Bunter, your co-host on Pilates Elephant, basically said it was just Raphael do it 'cause it's too early for me. That's your friend talking there. Left you alone to it. So thanks for that, Chloe. Lovely. Thank you for that. Congratulations, mate, on the Pilates Elephants podcast. I know you said, oh, mate, don't talk about that podcast. We're not all about this, but it is about that for us, for our audience. Been around about a year, is it now?
Yeah, we're up to episode, I think 52 or 3 or something like that. It's been a very surprising to Chloe and me, the success of the podcast. Like, it literally was just Chloe and I used to chat on the phone, pretty regularly and just have a rave about whatever. And then one day we just said, hey, why don't we record this and make it a podcast? And we did. And not with any expectation that anyone would be terribly interested in it. But people have been terribly interested, and I think we're up to something like 50,000 downloads so far, and we're doing about a couple of thousand a week now. So for a podcast that, I mean, we basically don't do any marketing or anything for it. It's just Chloe and I get together once a week and have a rave, and then we bring on, occasionally we bring on guests. And it's totally unscripted, and we just, jam it out. Yeah, it's really surprised me, the success of it. It's resonated with a lot of people.
I'm going to ask you in a second why you think that success has come. I'll give you a couple of moments to think about that. But for those of you who are watching it, if you listen to the podcast, you can't see, obviously it comes up on the screen, but just showing a screenshot so you can see the artwork. Pilates Elephants is the name of the podcast, and obviously it's available on Apple Podcasts. But I'm Android, and I managed to hook up with it on Pocket Casts. You can't get it on Acast for some reason, but yeah, if you're Android, then you can check it out by going into Pocket Casts, and well worth it is checking out too. Yeah, mate, what do you think what do you put the success down to? I know I think it is, but what do you think?
Well, I think it's probably two things, probably three things, I reckon. One is, I think, I mean, obviously, Chloe and I have got a real nice connection, and we just have fun, and we just have a fun conversation. And so I think, a lot of people have said to us that they just enjoy the kind of the banter and the friendship and the having a laugh and all that kind of stuff. And the second thing is, I think, what we do is we essentially ask questions that I think a lot of people are asking privately in their own mind, but are too afraid to voice publicly because they're worried that they'll transgress against some kind of taboo, by questioning things, and we voice it publicly, and then people give a great sigh of relief and go, "Oh, I'm not the only one," and so I think that really, really resonates with people.
Without a doubt. I would put it, I was going to say Chloe, first of all, as top reason, but then the second thing, is definitely the banter between you guys and the way you present it. I've always said, like, there's enough information out there now. There's enough CPD to sort out the healthcare system across the world. There's so much great information out there now, and we've moved so well, and we can tweak so many things to make it so much better. But a lot of that information is just inaccessible because the people who kind of put it out there are not very favorable for a large mass of the audience and that sort of stuff. Other people kind of jump on a soapbox a bit and make everyone feel a little bit kind of imposter syndrome. But you guys, for two reasons, basically, your personalities, I think, are great. And I don't know, we're biased in the UK. We love listening to Aussies. It's just kind of like we want to go and have a beer with you guys. It's just kind of, you guys can walk in anywhere and we take you and say, yeah, let's go out for a beer. But the second thing, I think, is the fact you're kind of Pilates teachers. We don't expect that. It's kind of like, it's almost as if it's a physio for sports therapists, it's like, oh, here we go again. It's going to be physios putting us down. They think we're just massage therapists. But there's something very humble about kind of Pilates-centered folk telling us these things, giving us the same message that's out there from a few other people, but in a way that seems much less scary. Are you quite alone in terms of the Pilates community? Are you giving out? Do you still get Christmas cards from STOTT Pilates and people like that, or have you severed some ties there?
Well, that's another thing that's really surprised us, is basically the almost complete absence of any pushback. So, if for those of you listening or watching, if you haven't listened to our podcast, it's called Pilates Elephants, and what we basically do is we talk about the elephants in the room in the Pilates world, the things that are a bit taboo to talk about or to question. The received wisdom that is handed down from the ancestors, that everyone does it this way. And we ask questions, things like that people always associate with Pilates, like posture and core stability and muscle balance and, stuff like that. And we just ask, is posture still important for, helping low back pain, or is core stability still really a thing? What's the science on that? And so we voice these questions. And it's, somewhat heretical in the Pilates world, to ask this, because these things form the core of, pun intended, of most Pilates curricula, and the core kind of belief system. Like, most Pilates, or not maybe not most, a lot of Pilates studios have words like core or posture or whatever in the name of the core control Pilates studio or whatever. Like, it's so integral in the belief system of Pilates, and we're questioning this. So we expected a lot of pushback and a lot of angry emails and Facebook comments and whatever, but we really have had essentially zero. I think on the Apple Podcasts app, we've got like 100 and something reviews, and like 3 of them are 1 star, and the other 97 are 5 star. And so it's been. I don't know how the folk at STOTT Pilates feel about me. They're probably just blissfully unaware, but I haven't been the recipient of any ill will. So I feel like the zeitgeist, the kind of public, thought cloud, is the culture is changing. Like 10 years ago, I think, probably I would have got a lot of hate mail for what I say, but now not so.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. It's the right time now for people who good educators, healthy educators who know how to give out information without feeling superior, and to kind of make people realize that they're on the same kind of level. It's a great time now. People are thirsty for information, but it's still got to be presented in the right way, which I think what you guys are managing to do. And also, mate, you got some people who haven't seen the episodes that are available. I don't know who writes your taglines or who kind of comes up with the names, but with things like imposture syndrome, I mean, that was just episode 2. That was you getting warmed up, which was great. And then posture. You had fasciating, which was again fantastic episode. And like you say, it does cover areas which are core to Pilates, but it's core to healthcare, full stop. I think particularly everything you've mentioned is so relevant for soft tissue therapists as well, because there's still, like we were saying off air, there's still courses out there which whether you're level 3 or level 4, in theory a more advanced course looking after injured people, you're still doing postural assessments and potentially thinking that the reason pain's there is because one shoulder's higher than the other or one leg's longer than the other. We're still doing all of the orthopedic tests like the STOTT test to diagnose whether, or to suggest that the sacroiliac joint is dysfunctioning, and all of these things we're still telling patients that there's potentially it's because they got degeneration, without thinking the how that kind of vocabulary and that tone could affect the patient on a subconscious level. It's still all being taught. So it's that's why I think your podcast is going to be so relevant for soft tissue therapists, because bit by bit, gently, it just shows, you know what, let's just tweak this a bit. Something else I really like about it, and I think people will pick up on, is that you guys are very happy to say, we used to do that, we used to think that. Yeah, I think that's really important as well. I loved it when you referred back to, because this reminded me as well, the magic circle. I used to teach classes myself as well, like 10, 15 years ago, when Les Mills was really big, and it was all like, I think I did Body Combat 6 or something. It was like, I'm showing my age now, but so that was when Pilates was really big as well. And I remember I laughed out loud when you started talking about the 101 ways to use a magic circle and all of that, because that's traditional Pilates. I think that's what people think it is. But one of the things I want to ask you about is, because it's going to interest these people, how much has Pilates moved on in terms of it can actually help athletes now? You've got an episode on this, but do you see Pilates helping athletes more now than the traditional kind of group of, I don't know, middle-aged, less mobile people who need to kind of strengthen their core?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think there's definitely been a shift in Pilates, and I'm thinking more particularly in Australia. Like, I'm not really familiar with the UK or European Pilates scene, or even the US scene to a certain degree. But I think in Australia, Pilates has certainly become more democratized, and it's not just the province of sort of like, you know, elderly rich folk anymore. It's for, you know, people of all ages, all shapes, all genders. Although, you know, in Australia it's still predominantly female, but you know, there's an increasing number of men doing it as well. So I think in that sense, Pilates has become a lot more accessible, and it's kind of for everybody. Um, uh, but in terms of like specifically for athletes, I think like, well, if you're, and so just for a tiny bit of context, I'm a Pilates teacher, and I also have a bachelor's degree in exercise and sports science and a master's in clinical exercise physiology. So I know a little bit about athletes. It's not my kind of specialty, but you know, to become a better athlete, what you really need to do athletic training. I mean, you need to, you know, work on explosive power and speed, you know, maximum strength, these types of things. And you know, most of that you really can't do inside a Pilates studio. You know, I mean, if I want to become a better sprinter, I need to be able to squat, you know, double body weight. And, you know, that's, there's just no facility inside a Pilates studio to achieve that. But having said that, there are some areas where we can help athletes as Pilates instructors, and that is probably in injury prevention. So we know that, you know, for instance, for running athletes like soccer players, I guess what you call football, and sprinters and things, hamstring tears are a real big issue that take a lot of players out of sport, out of competition. And you know, preventative strengthening is very effective at reducing the incidence of hamstring injuries. So, and that's something we can absolutely do in Pilates space. So, and there are other examples in other body parts, but basically, I think there's a place for Pilates as an injury prevention sort of supplement for athletes. But in terms of can we actually make them better athletes? Yeah, probably not. They probably need to just go and do some sport specific strength and conditioning, I think, for that.
How about the reformer? For me, it's something that I discovered totally changed everything. And I think a lot of people aren't that aware of it, is how challenging some exercises can be once you kind of move up a level and move away from the mat and the magic circle. And we had Liz Bailey, who works very high up as a physio and sports therapist with dancers, including a lot of West End shows. And she is a devout kind of disciple of using the reformer in terms of reducing risk of injury and rehabilitating injury. She loves it. She's got loads of videos out there. But can the reformer help more people if they get into it than people would imagine? Is that where Pilates really starts kind of mirroring what kind of Joseph planned when he was kind of coming up with his ideas?
Well, yeah, funnily, Joseph's studio, or he called it a gym actually, in New York, was based around a reformer. Like, so when you went there, back in the sort of late 50s, early 60s, the first thing you did was you got on a reformer and you did your full workout, and you used the other equipment, the Cadillac and the mat and the barrels and so forth. You used that one if all the reformers were taken and you couldn't get on a reformer, or sometimes Joe would come around and give you a special exercise to do at the end. If you were having trouble with some particular reformer exercise, he might give you some version of that on the Cadillac or something to kind of help you master it. So the reformer was really seen as the core of the workout in Joe's day. And, and in Australia now, and I believe a lot in the UK as well, that is now becoming, the norm as well. So we're seeing, in the early 2000s, the Pilates studio was mat based, and then there was sort of the equipment out in the back room with the Cadillacs and the reformers and all that. But now, most Pilates studios in Australia are just reformer only. No mat, no Cadillac, nothing else. And I think that's contributed to the massive increase in popularity in Australia. It just makes it so much more accessible, because the reformer, I think, of all of the pieces of equipment, I don't know if it's the most versatile, but it's certainly the most fun piece of equipment in Pilates. And there's just, I guess it is incredibly versatile. And I'm seeing, there's an explosion on social media, in my social media bubble anyway, of people just doing incredibly creative, things with the reformer that Joseph never thought up. And it's not even like, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, everyone on the reformer was just doing Joseph's original choreography. 10 years ago, with the rise of the group reformer, kind of mode of Pilates, we started seeing a lot of kind of gym-based exercises on the reformer. So people using a reformer kind of like they would use a pulley machine in the gym to do like flies and bicep curls and things like that. And now what we're seeing is just, it's become its own kind of art form, and people are adapting it and doing things that you can do on a reformer, but you couldn't do on a pulley machine, or you couldn't do on a Cadillac, because of the moving carriage and because of the straps and the platform, and using boxes in really creative ways. So I'm really excited by what I'm seeing there. And I think there's a lot more to unfold in terms of the reformer. And I think the reformer, at least for the next 10 years, in my view, is going to be the heart of Pilates and what's going to, explode the industry.
Yeah, definitely. I would check out, people listening to the podcast, soft tissue therapists out there. If you've got a colleague who is a Pilates teacher and they've got reformers in their studio, then go and check them out. They'll give you a tour, jump on one, show that there's so many, like Raph has said, it's so easy to tweak it and change it depending on what you think, how you've assessed your client, what you think they'd benefit from, with resistance. And it's hard as well. I mean, now it's all kind of like loading, and okay, you might not reach as much as squatting, double your weight, but you can definitely reach fatigue, which is what we're normally trying to do with a lot of clients, you know, within a sensible rep range. So Sandy here, do you know Sandy Key? Seems very knowledgeable, Sandy. Sandy Keane laughed at me mentioning that I taught Les Mills. I know it was a long time back and I needed the money. But yeah, the first thing you did in Joe's was to be assessed, which is interesting as well, is because it's like I give running gait analysis and I've got a lovely lab with loads of data and stuff. But what I tell, you know, the success of the session with me is only as good as how I interpret the data. And I'm sure it's very similar with Pilates. You can have some great equipment and access to all these things, but if you're basing it on, for example, we need to stimulate these particular muscles first of all before you move, then the whole thing kind of goes out the window, doesn't it? Which brings me on to the topic of core stability, which you did a fantastic episode on. I think it was just called WTF is Core Stability, which was great title. But again, I encourage people to have a listen to it because it's not just laughing at anyone who uses core stability. It's talking about the research, it's talking about how things developed and changed. And there's this lovely back and fro kind of conversation between Raph and Chloe to extract the information in a really nice, accessible way. So, but for people who aren't aware of, and I always hope there's people listening to podcasts who think, what's wrong with core stability? I do core stability. I get people standing on wobble boards all the time. It's how it works. How has core stability kind of changed since you were first using the term and directing your patients or clients to do things?
Well, I think, you know, when I grew up in the movement world in the early 2000s, core stability was just the central concept of all movement and health professionals. And it came out of some research in the late 90s in Australia here at the University of Queensland by Hodges, Hydes, Richardson and Joel. And they found that people with they had some second year university students who they were experimenting on, and they got them to, they put EMGs, so muscle electromyographs, on their multifidus and their transverse abdominis muscle, and then got them to raise their arm, and they measure, and also on their deltoid, and got them to raise their arm, and they noticed that the people with low back pain, their deltoid fired first and their transversus fired second, whereas with the people without low back pain, their transversus abdominis fired first and their deltoid fired second. And I also did some, you know, standing on one leg, lifting the other leg, and measured, you know, multifidus activation. And so, you know, a lot of people got very excited by that concept and thought, like, okay, well, if in people with back pain, transversus abdominis is firing late, well, if we can fix that and we can teach them to fire it earlier, you know, voila, we can fix no more back pain, you know, all gone. And so, you know, whole systems, in fact, Hodges and Richardson, you know, put out a book called something, I can't remember exactly the title. It was basically how to do core stabilization, how to activate people's transverse abdominis using real-time ultrasound and, you know, pressure biofeedback and all of that stuff. So, you know, when I was teaching Pilates in the even in the late 2000s, even in the early 2010s, we were having people sort of lie prone or supine, on a pressure biofeedback cuff, kind of like a little blood pressure cuff with a pressure gauge on it that measured how hard they were pressing into the mat under their low back. And you would ask them to, you know, move their arm or move their leg or whatever, whilst keeping the pressure on the gauge within, you know, a certain millimeters of mercury or PSI or whatever it was. And so to, you know, basically control their core, you know. And so that was the kind of the segmental stability approach. And so we did heaps of that. And I remember people, you know, having clients side lying on the Cadillac and putting my finger on their left L45 multifidus and saying, can you swell this muscle into my finger, you know, without moving your pelvis? And, you know, so all kinds of like super detailed muscle activation things. But it, you know, as time went on, starting around 2006, you know, there was heaps more research, and starting around 2006, there was the first systematic review came out of the literature on core stability. So basically, transversus abdominis and multifidus activation for low back pain. And it found that when you add core stability training to regular exercise, it was no more effective than just doing the regular exercise, just doing some crunches and some squats and some push-ups or whatever. And there's been a bunch more systematic reviews, I think 6 or 7 or maybe even 8 now, and basically they've all found no benefit of adding core stability training to just, if you do core stability training with someone with low back pain, it helps, but so does just going for a walk or doing some heavy deadlifts, or going to the local YMCA and getting the most generic program from the first year work experience kid. So I guess what the way I've come to view it is like, okay, it's a form of exercise just like any other form of exercise, and it's no better or worse than any other form of exercise in terms of its effect on helping people with low back pain. But to me, it just seems like, well, if you can get the same result by just doing some push-ups, it's a lot simpler. Why wouldn't you just do the push-ups? Why spend months learning how to activate your left L4-5 multifidus when you could just go for a walk instead and get the same benefit? So I guess that's where I've come to with it. So has it changed? I don't know if it's changed. I think in my view, and in the view I think of the scientific community, it's really just kind of gone out of fashion rather than changed as such.
Yeah, great breakdown of it, definitely. And it's worth mentioning again that Hodges' work at the time was like revolutionary. He's one of the great thinkers. It was incredible. And the idea of putting like cuffs down to measure it was just brilliant. But then even Hodges came out, I can't remember how many years later, and kind of said, actually, we didn't quite, we might have over kind of, the importance of what we thought at the time wasn't quite as important. But by then it was too late, wasn't it? You had the DVDs, the books and the workshops and the whole kind of like schools. Right. It was like, sorry, Hodges, I appreciate you changing your mind now, but a bit too late. It's like a Gil Headley moment with the fuzz, and like, I'm afraid you have to be dead for this stuff to actually kind of like, but yes, that's the problem. But I'm interested because along with this kind of activation of the core muscles, you had this idea of the neutral pelvis to help it, and everybody kind of like tilting slightly before they lifted and moved their legs. And how much, for some people, if you take that out of traditional Pilates, and this is going to show my ignorance of modern Pilates, take that away from Pilates, take out the neutral spine, the engage these muscles, pull your belly button in like there's a bit of cotton kind of pulling it away. Take that out. And what's left that you can call Pilates?
Funnily enough, just about all of it. So a little kind of mini history of Pilates is Joseph Pilates was the fellow who made it up. It's named after him actually, but he didn't call it Pilates. He called it contrology, and so he published his book Return to Life Through Contrology, I think in 1947, from memory, and then he had a gym in New York from round about then till about 67. I think he passed away. And so his view of contrology was that it's a whole body exercise method, and it's a vigorous exercise method. And in fact, he specifically says in his book, Return to Life, that Pilates is not about training, preferentially this or that pet set of muscles. Rather, it's for the uniform development of the body as a whole. So in his book, which gives very specific instructions on how to perform all of the contrology exercises, he never mentions the name of a single muscle once. There's a couple of times where he says, at the end of the exercise, he's given you all the instructions and he says, this exercise is good for the abdominals, or, this exercise is good for the arm muscles. But he's never more specific than just generic, the abdominals or, the arm muscles or whatever. And he never gives any instruction on, you need to activate this muscle, or we're targeting this muscle or anything like that. So he gives very precise instructions on the position for the exercises, so that, where your spine is and where your head is and where your toes are and where those kinds of things, whether your arms are straight or bent, those kinds of things. But none of it is related to, this idea of stability or activation. It's just like, this is the position for the exercise. You know, just like if you went to a martial arts class and they were teaching you how to do a particular technique, it's like, well, this is the position for this technique, you know. Or if you went to a tango class, it's like, this is the position for the tango, you know, and this is the position for this Pilates exercise. And so in the sort of years between the kind of the late 60s when Joseph died, and then kind of in the 80s when Romana Krasnowska was the head of Pilates. She was a dancer and an amazing mover, and she really put her own stamp on Pilates, and that's when it became much more dance-like. And a lot of the ideas that we have in Pilates now sort of stem from Romana's influence. So the idea of, I think, I mean, Joseph was very into posture, certainly, but the idea of, I guess I think probably the idea actually of pelvic tilt came even after Romana. Sorry. So after the next era, after Romana's era, was kind of, and Romana was the, I guess I would call Joseph's era the contrology era, and then Romana's era was the classical era. And so people who say they're trained in classical Pilates, it's, generally mean that they come from a Romana background. And then in the mid 90s up to the mid 2000s, early 2000s, is what I would call a contemporary era of Pilates. And contemporary, the literal definition of the word means like, current, at the same time. But it's actually semi-ironic that contemporary Pilates, self-named contemporary Pilates. So a lot of people who teach Pilates would self-describe as, I'm a contemporary Pilates teacher. It's become a style of, describes a style of Pilates that was contemporary in the mid 1990s up to the early 2000s, where there was all this research coming out from the physiotherapy world and the biomechanics world about, if you go back to 2001 and go, okay, what was the scientific opinion on low back pain? It was all about neutral spine and multifidus activation and bracing the core and all of that stuff. And that all kind of was infused into Pilates by the people who were trained by Romana. So the next generation after Romana, when they set up their own Pilates education, like Pura, STOTT, who, started STOTT Pilates, for example, they brought in all that physiotherapy, and that was all current at the time. It was, quote, contemporary. But the thing is, it's the contemporary Pilates folk have kind of, ironically, not remained contemporary because the science has moved on. And now, all that sort of circa 2001 science has been baked into the very DNA of the contemporary Pilates method. So we think like Pilates is synonymous with neutral spine and core activation, whereas in reality, that was just like one particular
phase
moment in history where, it's like, and somehow in Pilates, a lot of us have just got stuck in that moment.
That's so interesting. That's going to be gold dust to a lot of people, because I think that's, I don't know, like in the UK, that's, I think, everyone's vision of Pilates. It's like, stuck in that era of neutral pelvis and all this. And but in fact, really then, Joseph would be applauding the fact we're moving on from that now, probably going back to principles that he was embracing like in the 40s with using the whole body. And
I believe so. I mean, if you're watching this and you're curious, or you're listening to this and you're curious, just go on YouTube and type in Joseph Pilates teaching Pilates, right? Or Joseph Pilates doing Pilates, right? And you'll come with some videos. It's plainly a very vigorous whole body method. The way that he teaches it, it's not super detailed on, you've got to activate this muscle or that. The way that he cues, the way that he moves himself, it's very obvious that was his philosophy.
Again, fantastic mind. I think around the same period, Moshe Feldenkrais was kind of playing around with movement as well. Not sure if they ever met each other. I think I saw a photo of them both together. But the same kind of thing. And I love looking at these things they were coming up with that probably 60 years later or more, 70 years later, we're now actually thinking, especially when we look at the biopsychosocial model of how the metaphors we use, giving something that the patient can understand when it comes to movement, talking in a way that makes sense is so important for when we're training people and trying to get them to move a new way or a novel way or modify symptoms. They were so ahead of their times. Well, that's great. We'll make sure that that goes into the notes as well. So a few videos to see Joseph in action. Right, I've got a few questions here, if that's all right with you, Raf. They're starting to flood in now. There was this lovely silence where it all went quiet in the chat room, which means people are basically just transfixed and taking notes. And so I appreciate people have now put some questions down. Let's have a little look. Matt Scarsbrook, how are you doing, Matt, for the Massage Collective, who actually guests next week? That's funny enough. Matt, just a little reminder there, next week, Tuesday, 8 o'clock. Let's have a look. Matt says, question, in soft tissue massage therapy, we discuss different modalities / techniques are simply different ways of providing the same thing, therapeutic touch. In your view, this is for you, Raf, does Pilates fit this description, one way of many to increase strength and mobility, or does it provide a unique benefit to practitioners that can't be achieved with other practices?
No, I don't think it does provide a unique benefit. I think the evidence that we have on helping people with pain and injury is strongly converging towards there being a single sort of guideline around best practice, which is reassuring people, addressing psychosocial factors, and promoting physical activity in whatever shape or form. And that could take the form of Pilates, it could take the form of going to the gym, it could take the form of gardening or going for a walk, horse riding. Like there really is there's no defensible way to claim that any particular form of exercise is superior to another in terms of rehabilitation or helping people with pain. But having said that, I just want to put an asterisk on that, because it's really easy, and I've experienced it myself, and I see a lot of people also experience this, that when we start to realize, like, well, oh, holy crap, what we do doesn't have any special magical power to it. It's just like a combination of, human interaction plus reassurance plus getting moving, building confidence back in their body, and there's no special magic about the way I activated that muscle or this particular exercise we did. People can easily fall into a sort of a nihilistic trap of sort of despair, where you sort of think like, oh, well, if everything works the same, what the fuck am I? Why do I bother? Why not just tell them to go for a walk and to send them home? And the reality is that we are incredibly valuable as practitioners, because people, need guidance. They need, sometimes they need touch. They need, people to reassure them, to give them confidence, to help them, find the path. But it's like, whether you do that through Pilates or yoga or horse riding, it's like, it doesn't really matter. It's all just as good. Why do Pilates? Well, if you like Pilates, do Pilates.
Yeah, great. Brilliant answer. I'm sure Matt is clapping away there. It was a very leading question for you, Matt. I could hear your brain ticking over. You're trying to push Rafa into a corner there and then come back with a retort. Well, you can't retort now, Matt, but I think you guessed that with this.
I refuse to be cornered.
No, it's great. It's really good. And in fact, it leads in with what Fiona says here. It was Fiona who was a guest 2 weeks ago, I think. It's the episode which has brought all the guests in now. Fiona says, Raphael, you mentioned that Pilates work might not improve performance, but I wonder if the BPS model might disagree, i.e. there must be a psychological benefit and maybe novel movements that can help. So I think of what you've just kind of said, isn't it? If the person enjoys Pilates and they believe that this is what they need, then that could have benefits which maybe horse riding won't.
Yeah, I guess, Fiona, great question. I think there's definitely some nuance to this, and so we're thinking now in terms of athletic performance, right? So if I'm a footballer or a sprinter or a weightlifter or something like that, and I want to improve my performance, could I get benefit by, would it be beneficial to me to do Pilates? And I have to say that there's the thing that so I have to concede that you're, quite possibly there's value in what you say there, in terms of, okay, there might be value in me sort of gaining confidence or just having some mental time out from doing my normal training routine, like that all of those things might conceivably enhance performance. But then there's also an opportunity cost, right? So if you're a high level athlete, you've got a certain amount of time, a certain amount of energy and ability to recover. And a lot of professional athletes, unless they're at the truly elite level where they're just full-time professional athletes, most of them still have to go to school or work or look after kids or whatever. So time is a limited and scarce resource. And if you want to perform at the highest level, well, you need every hour. If you spend an hour doing Pilates, that's an hour you're not spending doing, say, strength and conditioning or technique practice or strategy for your match play or something like that. And so there might be some benefit to doing Pilates, but then there's also a cost, which is what are you not doing? And there is some literature on this, and what we find is that when it's not necessarily specific to Pilates, but it's around kind of core stability training for athletes. And what we find is that it basically has a neutral effect on performance. It doesn't seem to particularly benefit performance, or maybe there's a slight benefit, but it's a very, compared to the amount of time that is invested. I think it's pretty easy to argue that there would be a bigger benefit if you just went and did some double bodyweight squats for that same amount of time. You would enhance your sprint performance more.
There you go. Come back, Fiona, if you've got to reply to that. It's so tricky measuring performance, isn't it? There's so many other factors. But yeah, Fiona, we're waiting for your reply to that.
And that's why I like sprinting, because sprinting is really easy. There's no extraneous variables like people tackling you or strategy. It's just like how fast can you run down a 100-meter track. Whereas when we start talking about things like soccer, there's communication, there's teamwork, there's the opponents, there's all these other variables. So it's very hard
definitely. Yeah, great point. I'm not sure if it's Maeve or Marv. I'm sorry for my pronunciation. Maeve. We'll go with Maeve. Maeve says, I think Maeve's referring to episode 14, the WTF core stability. We're British here. We can't actually say what WTF stands for. WTF core stability says, that was an absolutely brilliant podcast. And continues, I too graduated from physio school in 2000 and then spent thousands on kinetic control and motor control courses and then years trying to get patients to activate their transabs. Then I read Leiderman's article, which is the collapse of the posture structural model or something like that. That's great.
The fall of the postural structural biomechanical model.
That's it. You got a better memory than me. That was the one. Yeah, fantastic collection of papers and studies, which kind of undo gently a lot of the stuff we kind of take as gospel. Haven't mentioned transabs or core stability for years now, exclamation mark. Geez, I remember those days well. I was personal training. I did NASM, which was kind of one of those, I think it was from California because I went over to see them, which was the same time as Paul Check. And it was always get them to do like a stability ball press up first of all or something, or push up, and then get them on the bench because you've activated the trans first, and then go back, finish off with some core activation exercises. Did that for about 4 years, thinking I was absolutely the dog's bees because it was state-of-art technology and charged people a fortune. Probably had more than I ever did in my life. And then slowly but surely realized that, okay, maybe doing a squat on a fit ball is not such a good idea, with a few lawsuits and stuff. But yeah, very good, Maeve. Good question, Maeve. Let me know how I pronounce your name. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Maeve continues, even the term core stability drives me nuts now, promotes the concept that the spine is unstable and most certainly not. So this is true. This is another thing, isn't it, which I want to touch on if we can, kind of with modern concepts and pain science. And I know you've had a couple of guests now on your podcast talking about pain. You had Bronnie Lennox in 51, and then last week you had Brendan Moat. There you go. And yeah, one of the things that's definitely surfaced with it, understanding how pain is an output, it can be affected by all different types of sensory input, including the language which we give patients, is the importance of words. I think that's why core stability has kind of come up under a lot of attack. So I'm interested, if I may, Rafa, how much do you, in the Pilates courses which you kind of offer and you're training the world, how much does the language you use, how much has it changed since the early days? And do you think that a Pilates instructor, to work at their full potential, a modern Pilates instructor needs to think about the language they're using and have an understanding of how that could increase pain output?
Yeah, so my language has changed very drastically. I used to be, like Maeve, um, all about instructing people in their multifidus. They're now telling which muscles to contract before we move. So before you move here, first you want to draw in your belly button very gently, blah, blah, blah. And now, over the years, over the decades I've been teaching now and reading a lot of research, and now I feel like I'm fairly much up to date with research in these areas, both in terms of the sort of the placebo/nocebo that you're talking about, and also just in terms of the research on motor control and motor learning. Firstly, the motor learning research really is, pretty clear at the moment. I'd say there's almost an overwhelming weight of literature in the motor learning field that external focus of attention cues are more effective at promoting skillful movement than cues which focus the person's attention inside their body. So rather than saying, draw up your belly button and, squeeze your quads and glutes to press the carriage out, okay, just say push the carriage out, because that way, instead of focusing on your quads and glutes and transversus, you're focusing on the carriage, right, and which is outside your body. And that seems very clearly to promote more skillful movement. And by more skillful, we generally understand more automatic, less requirement for conscious attention, more efficient, so, less effort to do the same movement, and more accurate. So there's a whole bunch of things that go into skillful, but, those are the main things. So definitely these days we're using more external focused cues, and that's what we teach in our training programs. And then secondly, just in terms of the sort of effect that our words can have on people's thinking and emotions and then experience of pain, that's also well documented that the words that we use can meaningfully and powerfully affect people's, not just their emotions around pain, but actually their levels of pain. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, how much pain do you have in your back right now? We can actually increase or decrease that pain oftentimes by just the words that we use. And there's quite a bit of literature on this. So basically, the way that we approach pain, and when we're talking about pain in the context of, we teach a clinical Pilates diploma, so people are learning to work with clients who come because they have pain. And is basically, we listen to the client at the beginning, and we hear their story. We ask them a whole bunch of questions about symptoms and history and all of that stuff. But then, once we start, working with them, we focus away from the pain. So we'll focus, rather than saying, how's your back in this exercise, we'll say, hey, do you reckon you can do another 5 reps? So we move away from, and when they come in next week to see them, we go, oh, how's your back been? We just go, hey, how are you doing today? Did you have a good morning? So did you do your exercises? So we basically, and everybody out there who's got or had a young child knows the power of distraction, right? So just focus on something else. It's also well documented in literature, right? If the more you focus on the pain, if like we've all had the experience, I think, of asking the client, oh, how's your neck today? And then we see the client like move their neck around and go, yeah, how is my neck? Oh, can I make it hurt? Oh yeah, it hurts when I do this. And it's like, well, why go looking for it? So yeah, we definitely make a point of focusing on more functional goals. Like, can you do another 5 reps? Oh, look, you're getting stronger. Did you do your exercises? Those kinds of things, rather than, talking about pain.
Excellent. It definitely sounds like there's a huge amount of modern information which you're kind of giving instructors, if Pilates instructors, that seems so relevant. And it's great as well, because it's a bit like soft tissue therapists. Soft tissue therapists enjoy making a living of putting their hands on people, strangers, which a lot of people don't like. And I always kind of say to them, look, you are blessed. You've already altruistic enough to want to rub kind of hot, sweaty backs with that hair going between your fingers and oil. And it's like not a lot of people want to massage feet for a living, So that's your gift. Just because we're tweaking the mechanism of effect, what we think is going on under our hands is something else. You are a fantastic person for wanting to do this. And then I think it's similar with Pilates instructors. I don't know whether you've found this, just because it's changed. I've always found Pilates instructors just have that knack of being able to say the right thing at the right time, and that intuition of using the language properly. I always remember, again, back in the 2000s, and I've used it ever since, about that idea of, for example, blowing a candle, but not so it goes out, just for enough to flicker. Something as simple as that to make someone actually think about. And again, it's an external cue, like you say, just that it's beautiful. And we're seeing more and more again that these metaphors, especially if the client can actually invent it themselves, are just huge in being able to change behavior. So I imagine with Pilates instructors, they're already a great bunch of people who have got that intuition, and they like using words and metaphors and things to try and get people to move in novel ways. So fantastic stuff. I'm excited about rekindling some kind of relationships with Pilates teachers. I can't wait.
I'm sorry, I know we've got to finish in a sec, but there's just something you said there that I really like to just unpack just in a small way.
Yes.
So not many people know this, but I actually have a diploma in massage, and I was a manual therapist for a while. And so I fancied that I could, palpate, vertebrae and transverse processes, whatever that were, misaligned, or, trigger points in people's muscle or whatever. And, that I could then, magic them away with my magic touch. And I was very, got great results. Clients used to, love getting massage. And since reading a lot of literature, so I've let my license lapse and I no longer practice manual therapy. But since reading the literature, there is, my belief is that there is definitely a value, and I guess it's quite supported by some literature. So there's definitely a value in manual therapy for things like neck pain, back pain, etc. But what we see is that the mechanism is just not what we thought it was. So we're not actually releasing knots in muscles or realigning vertebrae or whatever. And because when we see, when physiotherapists and osteopaths give an adjustment to the specific vertebra that is painful, it works. And if they give a adjustment 3 levels higher, it also works just as well, Or if they give just a push on the lower back in a general way, that also works just as well. And so I now am still a massive advocate of massage. And whenever I've got a sore neck, the first thing I do is go to my wife and ask her for a massage. But I now just think there's the skill doesn't reside in feeling which trigger point is active or whatever. It resides in the therapeutic touch, which communicates care and empathy, and which just provides maybe some general non-nociceptive input to the nervous system, and so it's valuable, but just not for the reasons that we thought, perhaps.
No, definitely. And it's so important that therapists who are kind of thinking, I've got to throw everything out now, listen back to that and realize that the skills may have changed. What we think is happening under our fingers has changed, but you're still doing the same thing, and you're still, from the moment that client walks through the door, greeting them and looking after them and showing the empathy and having that conversation, and everything is still all there. Because do you get students who read what you're saying and hear the kind of tweaking you're doing to what they originally kind of studied and paid probably a lot of money for? Is there kind of a stage of anger or kind of depression that they go through before being able to adjust? Is that something you see? Because we see it a lot in soft tissue therapy. Does it happen to Pilates tutors as well?
We used to, and maybe 3-4 years ago, and I think the reason we're not getting that anymore is probably partly because the whole zeitgeist is changing, and there's a lot more of that on social media from pretty reputable sources like Trust Me, I'm a Physiotherapist, or Physio Network, or things like that. So it's just kind of more culturally acceptable. And also I think we've got a bit better at not being so confrontational with people and presenting the information in a way that is respectful of their present beliefs and doesn't denigrate their previous ways of thinking. So I think these days we get very little angst about it all.
Cool. It's probably the thing which I suspect is, again, the way you present it. It depends how you reach out to people and tweak it. We have got a big problem in soft tissue therapy of, like we were talking a bit off air, of people trying to dispel being conduits for new information, but just shouting a bit too loud from the rooftops, and just kind of like shaking fists a little bit, or smiling and laughing. And I've tried to ban the emoji kind of laughter thing from Facebook comments, but it's not really working. I just find that can wind people up as well when people write a comment and everyone laughs, kind of thing, like, oh, everyone, but no one believes that you do this anymore. I think that
Yeah,
can scare you therapists.
agreed. I mean, I've been guilty of, putting a laughter emoticon in the comments when someone sort of, disparaged some kind of dinosaur of, biomedical thinking. But the last year or so, I've really come to the view that that's not helpful, and I've actually just unfollowed and blocked all of those people who on social media, are in the kind of quote evidence-based pain science crowd, but their main kind of theme is they just kind of disparage and make fun of people who aren't, in that crowd. I don't think that's really helpful. I think it's just unkind, and we can be, we can be supportive and respectful, and at the same time, respectfully disagree with, with people. And I think that even people who are like, massively biomechanically oriented and just saying, okay, your back pain is 100% caused by your disc being misaligned or whatever. It's like, okay, well, there's some nocebo in that for sure, but like those people, I'm pretty certain also are doing a lot of things right with their clients. Like they're probably also building a great therapeutic alliance and getting them moving, and building confidence in other ways by getting them stronger. Like I'm sure there's a lot of value in what they're providing. And so I think, just disparaging people and putting them down and laughing at them isn't really helping anyone. Although it does provide sort of momentary relief, I think that it's not helpful.
Yes, and Fiona's jumped in here saying, yes, learning environments need to nurture discussion, not shut it down with humiliating others. Bravo, Fiona.
Agree,
I think
Fiona.
a lot of people don't
Agree.
realize they're doing it. I think it's part of how you react when you've discover something new. It's like you celebrate it by kind of just showing that you're there. But it's tricky for the masses of people out there who aren't enlightened yet, and we are just a drop in the ocean, I'm afraid, people, and we have to remember that. But anyway, well, look at the time. It's I've already kept you 3 minutes over than what I promised, I'm afraid, Rafa, so thank you so much for that. Just to remind people, I know there's other questions out there. I'm sorry about that, people. I've managed to get to a few of them. But what I'll do is I'll forward in an email any other questions there to Rafa, and I'll put some answers down in here for you. Let's get rid of that a second. Right, so just before we head off, just to remind you guys, I'll put it up on the screen for those of you watching from your homes. If you're interested in seeing more information about the website and the Pilates courses and the training, it's all done online, then make sure you head to breathe with an E, BREATHE, .edu.au. So it's breathe.edu.au, and the website there's got a load of information on there, including something which is worth downloading now, a free report, 7 things you must know before you do a Pilates course. Straight into that you'll get an idea of how modern this is, how contemporary this is. I can't use that word anymore, it means nothing, but the different take it is. And also, if you want to just dive straight into what I think is the equivalent of the first 4 seasons of Lost in podcast version, then I would head to Pilates Elephants on whatever podcast app you prefer to listen to. And I warn you now, kind of forget about your kids and partner for a while. It is like a one after the other. It's really nicely produced, and great banter and kind of sharing and between Chloe and Raf, and just covering these topics which people want to hear about, especially if you're a little bit shy and not quite sure, and you want to hear something that's not going to kind of make you feel threatened and all the imposter syndrome. Then this is one of the great resources which I'll be harping on about for the next month or so. So do check out that Pilates Elephant. Okay, Raf, thank you so much. What have you got planned for us today? I'm about to go to bed and crash out, but it's only like 8 o'clock or something for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just gone 8 a.m. This has been awesome. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and thanks so much to everybody who's put in comments and questions. And I'm sorry we didn't get to answer all of them. What have I got for the rest of the day? I don't know. My calendar's pretty packed, but it's a great day. I just look at. I mean, I most people probably know me from the podcast, but I actually run a $5 million a year business, Breathe Education, and so most of my time is meetings and strategy and stuff like that. So I've probably got a bunch of those things happening today.
Yeah, you got a few other things to do apart from chatting to Chloe for an hour a week. Yeah, a little 5 million a year project thing going on. Great. No, I really appreciate it, Rafa. And if people want to follow you and kind of see what you're doing, are you particularly vocal on any of the social medias?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, and I post very regularly on Instagram. And basically, what I try and do on Instagram is deliver a lecture. Like as in, I give lectures within our programs, within our Diploma of Clinical Pilates. I try and give a little mini lecture because you get 10 slides in a carousel. So I try and teach you something useful about how the body works or how pain works or whatever in 10 slides. So if you're interested in pain, exercise, movement science, or I also talk about Pilates business, follow me on Instagram.
Brilliant. And we'll make sure that links to all those social media go into the podcast notes. And Sandy Keen's giving something away here. I'm not sure what it is. Raphael, hope the 5th of November brings you some joy. What's going on there?
Yeah, what is happening on the 5th of November? Oh, we're getting out of lockdown. Actually, Sandy, I think that's what you're referring to. But we're getting out of lockdown. Before that, I'm in Melbourne, and we've been in lockdown for months now. That we've been we've had a curfew. Not allowed to leave the house except to go to the doctor, go to the supermarket, or get vaxxed. And we're getting out. It's now Wednesday here. We're getting out the day after tomorrow.
Oh, good on you. That's
cow. Like, this is going to be amazing. So, Sandy, if that's what you're referring to, thank you. And if it was something else, please enlighten me.
Right, people. Thanks so much for joining us. Raf, don't go away yet. I'm going to close down so that everyone gets chucked out of here, but then I'll say goodbye to you in person. Next week, Tuesday, back at the normal time at 8 o'clock UK time. Then we will have the Massage Collective in the house. So it'll be Becky and Matt and Anna Marie having a look at, basically it's a bit early, isn't it? It's not quite Christmas, but looking at kind of the year in terms of soft tissue therapy, what we've learned. Pretty positive, really. What looking forwards. Therapy Expo, we'll chat about that, what the Massage Collective are doing at Therapy Expo in November. And having a nice chinwag, which is always a pleasure with Massage Collectives. That'll be Anne-Marie and Becky and Matt with us next Tuesday at 8 o'clock. So make sure you join us for that. But that all said and done. Thanks again to my guest, Raphael Bender. And thanks everyone for joining us live. And we'll see you next Tuesday, hopefully. Take care of each other.